Hello and welcome to the Australian Contact Centre Sales Effectiveness Top 10 webinar. Thank you all for making the time to hear about our research. If you're anything like most of the leaders in contact centres that I know, you haven't been sitting around with your feet on the desk waiting for me to come along and fill up your day. So we really do appreciate your time, and we've got just under 50 people attending today, so great roll up. Thank you very much. We've deliberately kept the webinar short and sharp to fit in with your busy schedules, so let's get straight into it. My name is Peter Grist and the company is called Grist. So for those of you that have dealt with us before under the brand of Global Reviews, we've recently rebranded, and the Global Reviews brand now sits under the Grist brand, so just to clear up any confusion there. Grist is all about helping organisations align the behaviour of their frontline with the business's value proposition and objectives. And we do this by providing benchmarking, which we'll be discussing today, but also we design and deliver change programs to help embed really proactive sales and service cultures inside organisations. We've been doing this now since 1989, which is 25 years. And approximately 50% of all of our work is in contact centres. So we have a broad experience across many contact centres. Okay, so what we're going to do today is, firstly, I'll take you through the methodology by which we got the data that we'll be discussing today. Secondly, we'll have a look at the results and be identifying exactly some of the behaviours that really do set top performers apart from the rest. We'll have a look at some really delve into the needs-based selling behaviours that just mention a couple that are an opportunity for all contact centres. Even the top performers aren't necessarily performing that well in these criteria. We'll then focus on not just the behaviours, but because when we talk about the behaviours, I'm sure they won't be rocket science or new to you. You will have heard of them or seen them or had them trained before. The key question is, what do you actually need to do to get them firmly embedded and consistently delivered inside your organisation? And then we'll finish off with a quick conversation about, what you can do immediately to get a feel for how you compare. So as we go through the webinar, please ask as many questions as you can. To do this, you can use the GoToMeeting toolbar down your right hand. I think for most of you, it will be on the right hand side of your screen, and you can post questions. Now, whilst we won't be answering questions during the actual webinar, we will guarantee that we will get back with an answer about all questions and queries that you have. So please ask lots of questions. Okay, let's have a look at how we generate the data in the first place. I think this is critical because if you don't really believe in the validity and reliability of the data that we're going to be putting in front of you today, then you're very unlikely to take much notice of the insights or recommendations that come from it. How we actually do it is we have our own contact centre, a little contact centre here at Grist, and we employ people to act as customer surrogates who then ring a broad array of companies, and as it says at the bottom of the slide there's 69 companies that are part of this research. What we then do is we have benchmarking analysts who assess the calls, and they use the Grist Sales Effectiveness Benchmark to compare what actually happened on the call as to what is best practiced and considered to be best practice needs-based selling behaviours. So people often ask, well, how do you decide what goes into the benchmark? There's a couple of answers to that. Firstly, 25 years of working inside sales and service organisations and contact centres and knowing which behaviours are the critical ones that drive things like conversion and customer advocacy. And secondly, through our benchmarking, we're able to actually correlate behaviours back to sales outcomes, and that helps us actually decide what goes into the benchmark and what doesn't. But also how we weight the importance of certain behaviours over others in order to come up with overall scores. So you'll also see that this research is based on over 3,000 calls that were made over the previous 6 months by Global Reviews. Okay, well, let's have a look at who were in the top 10. So big congratulations to all of the companies that actually made it into the top 10. But one of the insights that I would pull out of this, other than to look at the companies who have done very well, I'd also like to have a big congratulations for the health insurance industry, which has got 6 out of the top 10 positions. So lots of insights can be gleaned from this slide, like the companies that make up the top 10, but particularly interesting is why health insurance performs so well. And while I don't profess to have all of the answers, I do have a couple of ideas from working with health insurers and also working with other organisations. But firstly, the health insurance product is pretty complex, and it does require you to have a genuine understanding of the customer in order to be able to even decide what might be the right solution. Secondly, it's a product that I think is reasonably easy to get people talking about and to relate to people at an emotional level, which is, we know, is a key driver to great sales, needs-based selling conversations. Most people care about their health and are willing to have a chat about it. And then finally, I'd say about the health insurance is, I think it's about leadership within the industry. And this leadership is really driving a race to the top based on great service and great interactions with customer engagement of customers, as opposed to some other industries that we see where there's absolutely a race to the bottom based on who can be the cheapest. So health insurance has done a great job in setting itself up as an industry that really cares about needs-based selling and doing the right thing by its customers and prospects. So now let's get a little bit more detailed into what the top 10 are doing differently. In this section, we're just going to concentrate on the areas that provide the most insight and where the biggest difference is between the top 10 and the rest. We're not going to go through every single behavioural criteria that makes up the benchmark. We're just going to focus on the ones that are the most critical. So on this slide here, what we've done is given you the 2 comparisons that show the performance of 2 major categories that make up the benchmark. Now, there is an engagement category and there is an acquisition category. The engagement category is a measure of how customer focused you are, while the acquisition category is a measure of your sales capability. And these category scores are based on a subset of behaviours that naturally fall into one category or the other. And these category scores are the weighted averages of the behaviour scores for all of the individual behaviours that make up these categories. You'll see there that, and this is the common theme throughout the rest of the presentation, is the graphs compare the average performance of the top 10 against the average of all of the other companies that we benchmark, but also compares to the average of the bottom 10 companies in the benchmark. So as you'll see, if we start with engagement, there's around about a 7% difference between the top 10 and the average of all of the others, and then there's a 12% difference. So engagement, if you want to think about these as more the soft skills, what I'd see is more the tickets to play. If you weren't able to actually demonstrate some of these skills, then you probably wouldn't even have a contact centre open at all. However, I think the real insight on this page comes when you look at the acquisition scores, where we see that the top 10 is around about the 68%, but there's a 24% difference in the capability of the others, and then there's a massive 39% difference between the sales capability of the top 10 and the bottom 10. So just to give you a bit of an insight into what this actually means in bottom line results, the research we've done across many industries indicates that for a 20% lift in acquisition score, you can expect to have a 10% lift in your conversion rate. So this data is telling us that the companies that are in the bottom 10 are at least missing 20% of their conversion rate that they could be getting when customers ring into their organisation. And as we know, that can absolutely be the difference between being a very successful organisation and an also-ran. So in summary on this slide, is that while there are differences in engagement or the soft skills, it is really the differences in the sales skills that are setting apart the top 10 from the others and the bottom 10 in our sales effectiveness benchmark. So let's now drill down and have a look at some of the critical sales behaviours that are driving these results. Now, it's really important to note at this point that while the percentages that are on this slide are weighted averages, the percentages on the following slides indicate the actual percentage of time the behaviour was demonstrated on the calls. So let's jump in and have a look at some of those now. Now, the first slide here is what we call the customer journey. And while this is by no means all of the behavioural criteria that make up the benchmark, it does display the most critical ones and also the behaviours that you can put into a logical call flow that sets up a great sales conversation. We start with engaging the customer at the start of the call, move through to setting the scene and bridging statements into setting up a sales conversation, through into the questioning and understanding phase, and then into solution and closing out the sale. And once again, we've plotted the top 10 against the average of the rest and the bottom 10. Starts to give you a good overall picture of where the differences are, but also where some of the similarities are. So while we delve into the behaviours that we'll delve into the behaviours that have stars behind them down the bottom in more detail in the next few slides, what you can immediately see is that while the top 10 outperform in many areas, there are some areas where all organisations have an opportunity to improve. So if you look at to the left-hand end of the graph, you will see the criteria called match benefits to needs, which is a universal opportunity for all contact centres. This criteria measures the ability of a consultant to clearly explain how a company's products and services will directly satisfy a customer's underlying emotional need. To give you an example of what we would like to hear, say on a general insurance call, it'd be something like, you know, our XYZ car insurance provides a hire car in the event that your car is off the road due to an accident. So Jenny, what this means is that if you have an accident again, you'll still be able to get the kids to school and to soccer practice, and your husband won't have to take time off work. Is that the sort of cover that you're actually looking for? Obviously, that would be done after some great needs-based questioning. You know, needs-based selling or solution selling has been around for 1983 when a guy called Mike Bosworth first wrote about it. So that's 30 years later, and we're still unable to demonstrate one of the most critical elements that drive conversion. Instead, we generally fling features and hope the customer that makes the connection for themselves. Okay, well let's now move on to the next slide where we start to delve into some of the critical behaviours that absolutely drive sales conversion and customer advocacy. Sorry, I'm struggling with that word today. Let's start with clear confirmation of assistance. Now, if you look here, you can see that the top 10 is rating 47% with regard to their ability to demonstrate this behaviour. Others are demonstrating 16% and the bottom 10 are at 6%. Just to explain why this is so critical, and it really is a simple behaviour that even for the top 10 we would expect to be seen demonstrated at a much higher level. When an average person rings a contact centre, there's a lot of things going through their mind. Things from, I hope I can get through the IVR, I hope I can get someone that, I hope I'm in the right place, I hope I get someone that can actually help me, unlike last time. I hope, and a lot of people actually think, I hope it's an Australian call centre and they can actually understand me. So one of the things that they absolutely need early on is a very definitive statement that the person on the other end of the line is going to take ownership of their call and to help them. But what we see is far more, in the majority of cases, we see very equivocal statements or avoidance type statements that don't build trust that the customer's going to have their inquiry actually dealt with appropriately. Now the 47% there, just to reinforce, this is 47% of all of the calls that we made to the top 10. Only on 47% of the times did we actually get something that we would judge as a very definitive, clear confirmation of assistance. And if you look down at the bottom 10, we're only hearing this on 6%. So this tells us a lot about what agents or consultants think their role is and about their confidence to actually step up to the plate and help a customer or a prospect out. Okay, next slide. Now that we've confirmed that we will help the customer and put them at ease if we've done a clear confirmation of assistance, we need to provide some structure to the call by letting the customer know what needs to be done to help them, and this is the bridge to the sales discussion. This behaviour also earns the consultant the right to ask broader and deeper questions than the customer might have been expecting. This is a very basic skill that is in virtually every sales methodology that I've ever seen, yet you can see from here that it's only been demonstrated on 37% of calls, even in the top 10. And then what we see is it falls away quite dramatically into others where it's only 8%, and then for the bottom 10, they're not even seeing themselves as experts that can help guide a customer through a call. They're just purely in reactive order-taking mode. Next slide we've got here is, so we've now, if we've done it well, we've set the customer up, we've let them know why we would like to ask them some questions and how that's going to link to helping them get their issues resolved or finding the right solution. This is the most heavily weighted behaviour in the whole benchmark due to the fact that it correlates most closely with sales conversion. We know that understanding the customer's need and then being able to articulate how our product or services will actually solve that need is absolutely critical in helping drive conversion and helping customers see value in our products and services. So think about what are really the underlying needs that people have when they actually call into our contact centres for our product. I might be asking for a mortgage, but it might be the fact that I need a bigger backyard for my young children to play in. I might be asking for health insurance, but what I really want to avoid is my wife going into a public ward when she has our first baby in, say, 12 months' time. It might be that I'm asking for car insurance, but what I really want to avoid is being stuck out the back of Burke when we go on our driving holiday with no way to get myself and my grandmother home, who's coming on a trip of a lifetime with us. We need to understand what that is. So this is not only a critical part around making sure that we convert the initial sale, but it's also what gives us the information that drives the opportunity to cross-sell and upsell. So let's have a look at the results. This does set the top 10 apart quite dramatically from the rest. We're seeing this at 70% of times in the top 10, but then it falls away quite quickly to the average of all the others, which is 33%, and then the bottom 10% where we're only seeing any sort of open questions to discover broad and emotional needs on 6% of calls. This is having a massive impact on their ability to convert customers. Next one, specific solution advised measures the ability to understand the customer well enough in order to be able to provide them with a single solution. Our customers ring organisations to speak to experts who can advise them on the best option. Whilst I know that there are complications in certain industries with regard to your ability to be able to make recommendations, it is an absolute key driver of whether we're going to be successful to be able to get the customer to see value. So in the top 10, doing well, and once again separating them from the others at 89% of calls, we get a really good, clear enunciation and clarification of the specific solution that's being advised by the company. Drops away quite quickly to 54% for the others, and then we fall right away to 21%. So, you know, the bottom 10 are really asking very few questions. They're assuming the customer knows what they want, and then they tend to just overload the customer with options at this stage. Okay, last of the key criteria that we're going to look at is the attempt to close the sale. Given the way we conduct this research, we always object at the end of the call. So while we can't measure if the sale was actually closed, what we can measure is if a convincing and confident attempt was made to close the sale by the consultant. Before we discuss this further, I want to give you a little bit of context. We instruct all of our customer surrogates to be warm sales leads, and around about this stage of the call, we instruct them to be saying something like, okay, well, that all sounds pretty good. And then to deliberately leave the silence like I just did then. So the results you're looking at here are based on that scenario. So even when you've got a willing customer on the line that's telling you that things are pretty good and it all sounds okay, on only 69% of occasions do even the top performers ask us for the sale in a confident manner. Now, then others drops away very quickly to 44%, and then the bottom 10 are asking on 30% of occasions. But what this really says to us is, well, number one, we're not asking enough, but it also begs the question as to what percentages would we get if we were actually really dealing with the average customer out there that we know can be a lot more difficult than what our customer surrogates are asked to play out. So once again, if you're looking for a quick win, if we didn't do anything else differently, if we just asked the customer in a confident manner whether they wanted to become one of our customers or prospects to become a customer, we could lift our conversion rates almost immediately. Okay, what we're going to do now is have a look at what's actually going on behind the scenes that's creating these results. So while I can't hope to discuss all of the things it takes to create a high-performing sales contact centre, what we can do is mention the 2 or 3 things that we have found to be most critical. At an overall level, though, all of these 3 factors we'll discuss on the following slide can be summed up with a statement around high-performing sales contact centres understand the frontline and leadership behaviours that drive sales and customer outcomes, and they are comfortable assessing, developing, leading and managing behaviours. They operate at a behavioural level much more often than lower performing contact centres that focus almost solely on hard KPIs and outputs. So let's jump into the 3 critical factors that we'll highlight today. High-performing sales contact centres work to create a shared understanding of what great looks like. I am constantly amazed at the lack of consistency in the understanding of what a great conversation looks like in organisations. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We recently did a lot of work with a large bank where we asked people at all levels in the bank, if we listen to 100 calls, what percentage of them would you be happy with and do you think really bring our value proposition to life? Now, we asked that consistently. What we found is that senior leaders told us that they would be happy with only 30% of the calls, whilst the frontline told us that they would be happy with just over 80% of the calls. So you've got to ask yourself, how does that happen in an organisation? How can you have any hope of bringing a consistent value proposition to life if senior leaders and frontline differ in their rating of the quality of the conversation by 50%? Also, another example of a large insurer that's telling me that their conversion rates are okay. And when I asked why their conversion rates are okay, they told me because they're better than last year. However, when we benchmarked them, we found out that they were making no attempt to uncover the customer's underlying needs, and then they were moving on to overload the customer with features. This tells us that the conversion rate wasn't okay, and they didn't understand the behaviours that were driving them. So these are very sophisticated organisations, but they have little understanding of the inputs that are driving the outputs. So my challenge to you is something that you can do to take out of this webinar is to get a group of the most senior leaders that you can find in your organisation and either start with a blank sheet or give them a small 1-page calibration tool that we're happy to provide you on the back of this webinar, and ask them all to go away and listen to a call in isolation and to rate that call, and then to get them all back in a room and to find out exactly whether there is any consistency at the most senior level in your organisation about what great looks like. You can't leave the quality of the conversation to the QA team. It must be owned by the most senior leader in the organisation, and they must overtly drive calibration and consistency around it on a day-to-day basis. So David Thodey at Telstra, probably one of the busiest executives in the land, he takes time to sit down and do calibration sessions with his team and with others in his organisation. It's a critical function that needs to be provided. Okay, next one is once you've got that understanding, then organisations that are good at proactive sales behaviours align organisational systems and processes. So I'll give you another example here of how misaligned organisations can be. We're doing some work with a large insurer the other day who's trying to drive a deeper and broader conversations with the customer. Yet it was only the sales numbers that drove the scorecard and the reward and recognition. Everyone in that organisation knew that it didn't have to be anything about the quality as long as you just kept making sure that the sales number was there. Another example of a bank where the leaders acknowledged in less than half their calls were up to standard, but it had a QA process that was giving a rating of 93%. How can you drive consistent embedding of behaviours when you've got such misaligned messages in the business? So without, it's hard enough to actually embed behaviours without having to drive those conflicting messages. If you want to be a high-performing sales contact centres, you need to work out how to measure behaviours in line with your expectations and embed these measures into your HR systems and processes. And finally, high-performing sales contact centres work to ensure that their leaders spend the majority of their time coaching and developing behaviours. Now, these behaviours are tricky things, and there's only one way to effectively coach and develop behaviours, and that is by being involved in the business where the behaviours are happening, not sitting in an office, not conducting operational tasks, and not sitting behind a computer. There are three critical behaviours that coaches must do, behavioural coaches must do above all others, and I'll take you through those now, and we can provide you with these following the webinar. They must be great at one-on-one observation and coaching. The ability to observe and then sit down and make the link between behaviours and results and then convince someone to change their behaviour to achieve different results is the number one skill. Secondly, must be great at running group sessions and team meetings that leverage best practice and build commitment in the team. And then thirdly, they must be really good and dedicated to spending time on the floor in the business conducting informal observation and coaching at a high frequency. They've got to be on the dance floor where the behaviours are actually happening. And these activities should take up the majority of the time of a team leader. So if you want to check how you're performing in this area, and once again we'll provide you with this afterwards, conduct this little experiment. Unannounced, go out onto your floor and ask a sample of consultants these three questions. What specific sales behaviour are you working on right now? And see whether they can actually answer it. Most can't. Why is this behaviour important? Ask them questions around why that behaviour would be worth working on. What's in it for the customer and what's in it for the business and what's in it for them? Ask them to demonstrate that behaviour to see whether they actually even know how that behaviour could be brought to life. And it also tells you what quality of coaching they've had. And then the last question is, show me how your previous coaching and results has led you to this point. And that will give you a very, very good feel for whether you're anywhere near best practice with regard to embedding good quality, high quality behavioural coaching. Okay, so we are pretty much on time now, so I just wanted to finish up with the last slide. So this is just really a summary of what I've just discussed with you. First of all, we'd ask you to go out there, if you're looking to make some changes on the back of this webinar, check that you have a shared understanding of what best practice looks like. And we will definitely give you some tools and some calibration instruments that you can use to help out there. Assess the alignment of your behavioural shapers. So these are your organisational systems and processes. How aligned is your sales methodology with what great should look like? Is your reward and recognition system and your scorecard lined up with what you actually expect, but what behaviours you expect on the call? And also, critically, is your core quality system just all about process, or is it actually about measuring high quality sales and service behaviour? And then finally, by asking those questions of your consultants I mentioned before, get out there and assess the frequency and quality of your leadership activities. So I know we also said that we would give you some data about particular industry performance and how you perform in your industry. That will also be provided to you as a follow-up to the webinar. So please look out for that, and we'll be following up immediately with that data. So thank you very, very much for making the time to come along and listen to some of the insights that we've gathered from our research. We look forward to talking to you, providing you some more support if you need to go on this journey of becoming a truly high-performing sales contact centre. So thank you, and I hope you have a great day.